May 1943. Admiral Karl Dönitz stares at the Atlantic map, realizing that 40 of his deadliest U-boats and 2,000 elite submariners have just vanished in a single 31-day period. Just weeks ago, he thought he had won the war. Now, his men are calling it the Stalingrad of the sea. The Allies had unleashed a weapon that turned the ocean itself against the Germans. But how did this collapse happen so violently and so fast? The answer wasn't blind luck, and they didn't just build more ships. The Allies literally stripped the Germans of their greatest weapon, invisibility. Let's look at how they turned the apex predators into prey in just 1 month and uncover the technological cheat code that permanently changed the rules of this underwater cat-and-mouse game. To understand the slaughter of Black May, you have to understand how a U-boat actually hunted. In 1943, a submarine was basically a surface ship that could occasionally dip underwater. They had to travel on the surface to use their diesel engines to charge their batteries and keep up with the convoys. They felt safe doing this at night because the ocean is pitch black. The Allies couldn't shoot what they couldn't see. But in the spring of 1943, the British and Americans deployed a system update. They introduced Centimetric Radar. It was small enough to fit inside a patrol plane or an escort ship, and it was so powerful it could detect a U-boat's periscope sticking out of rough seas in the dead of night. Suddenly, the darkness offered zero protection. Combine that with Huff-Duff, high-frequency direction finding. Whenever a Wolfpack radioed Dönitz to coordinate an attack, Allied antennas instantly triangulated the transmission. Before the U-boats even saw the convoy, the Allied destroyers knew exactly where the Wolfpack was sleeping. The trap snapped shut in early May around Convoy ONS-5. It was a slow-moving group of 42 merchant ships heading from Britain to America. Dönitz threw everything he had at it. He amassed a super pack of nearly 40 U-boats. At first, the old tactics worked. Taking advantage of a massive Atlantic storm, the U-boats slipped through the screen and sank 12 merchant ships. The Germans thought they were repeating the glory days of March. But then, the weather cleared and a heavy fog rolled in. The fog blinded the German lookouts, but radar doesn't care about fog. The Allied escorts, now reinforced by newly arrived support groups, turned their ships around and charged directly into the Wolfpack. The hunters had become the hunted. The Allied destroyers unleashed the Hedgehog. Instead of rolling depth charges off the back of the ship blindly, the Hedgehog mortar fired a ring of 24 bombs ahead of the destroyer, right where the sonar was pointing. They only exploded on contact. If the crew heard a massive underwater crack, they knew they had just crushed a steel hull. In a frantic 48-hour counterattack, the Allied escorts sank 6 U-boats. When the smoke cleared, 40 German submarines had been beaten back by a handful of destroyers. The slaughter at ONS-5 was just the appetizer. The Allies had closed the mid-Atlantic air gap using long-range B-24 Liberator bombers. There was no longer a patch of ocean where a U-boat could safely surface. And if a U-boat did manage to crash dive to escape a plane, the Americans had a terrifying new toy waiting for them: the Mark 24 Fido torpedo. Fido wasn't a standard torpedo. It was an acoustic homing missile dropped from an airplane. Once it hit the water, it listened for the cavitation, the churning bubbles of the U-boat's propellers. Imagine being a German captain. You hear the bomber overhead. You order an emergency dive. You make it to 200 feet. You sigh in relief, thinking you've escaped. Then, the sonar operator hears a high-pitched whine. It's getting closer. You try to turn, but the sound follows you. It tracks your engines in the pitch black. Then, the hull implodes. In May, engagement after engagement ended in a bloodbath. When a Wolfpack targeted Convoy SC-130, they found it surrounded by 13 warships and constant air cover. The U-boats didn't sink a single merchant ship, but 2 U-boats were instantly destroyed. Panicking at the sudden spike in losses, Admiral Dönitz made a catastrophic tactical error. He realized his U-boats were being caught by radar at night while charging their batteries. So, on April 27th, he issued a new order for submarines crossing the treacherous Bay of Biscay. Stay submerged at night, and only surface to charge during the day. He figured that during the day, the lookouts could at least see the bombers coming and shoot back with their anti-aircraft guns. It was a fatal miscalculation. By staying on the surface during the day, the U-boats became sitting ducks for the heavily armed British Coastal Command aircraft. A U-boat's deck gun is no match for a 4-engine bomber dropping depth charges at 200 miles per hour. In May alone, aircraft patrolling the Bay of Biscay sank 6 U-boats. Dönitz had ordered his men to fight a modern air force with 20mm deck guns. One U-boat commander later wrote that going to sea in May 1943 felt like marching the crew to their doom. By the end of the month, the math was apocalyptic. The Allies lost 264,000 tons of shipping, half of what they lost in March. But the Germans lost 40 U-boats. That was roughly 25% of their entire operational fleet worldwide, erased in 31 days. 1,832 German submariners were killed. Only 183 survived. They lost their veteran captains, their boldest lieutenants, and their sense of invincibility. On May 24, 1943, Admiral Dönitz opened his war diary and recorded his shock at the frightful total. He knew the math. If he kept fighting, he wouldn't have a navy by August. Against the furious objections of Adolf Hitler, Dönitz issued the order to withdraw. He pulled the wolf packs out of the North Atlantic. Black May wasn't just a naval victory. It was the prerequisite for the liberation of Europe. By breaking the back of the U-boat fleet, the Allies secured the Atlantic lifeline. Millions of tons of steel, fuel, and American soldiers could now flow freely into Britain, building the unstoppable fist that would eventually smash into the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. The U-boats would return, bringing new weapons like the snorkel, but they were ghosts of a dead era. The happy time was over. The Battle of the Atlantic proved that courage and raw numbers mean nothing when the enemy rewrites the rules of engagement. In just 1 month, the hunters of the deep realized that the ocean was no longer a hunting ground. It was a trap, and the door had just locked behind them. If the story of Black May and the acoustic homing torpedo changed how you view naval warfare, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm that the gritty, unpolished history of technology and tactics deserves to be heard. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the archives. What do you think? If the Allies hadn't invented centimetric radar, could the U-boats have starved Britain out of the war? Let us know in the comments below.